From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life was drawn. From every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view.
Well, the last week you guys have seen the few Edgar Allan Poe things that I've been working on, those little videos. And I'd like to introduce my little gremlin, my helper, Steph. Come on in. This is my little gremlin. You guys remember her from a few shows. She's going to help me out tonight. We're going to make that homemade stuffing again for anyone who missed that episode. And I'm going to doctor it up just a little bit finer tonight. We're also going to be making some stuffed chicken breast. And we are going to be watching Vincent Price, An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe. Now, this is a 53-minute movie that I'm going to be breaking down over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And for each story, we're going to have a separate episode. So these will be shorter episodes because of time constraints and the equipment that I'm still using. I did get a computer, so as soon as I learn how to use the son of a bitch, we'll get better episodes. But until I learn how to use it, I have to use this thing. And as far as the rest goes, I want to take one opportunity and just say thank you to everybody who's donated and who's helped the kitchen. You guys are the reason that the show is still on fire and there's still always something cooking right here in the Killer Kitchen. So join me tonight and join Mr. Vincent Price as we watch The Telltale Heart. Yes, it is. Now, as my little gremlin here is starting off, we're making homemade stuffing tonight. And she's crunching up the bread. You got to pull it apart into little pieces, right?
Uh-huh.
And what do you do when you pull it up into little pieces?
I don't know, Larry.
You're supposed to beat it, right?
Yeah.
Scrunch it up real good and then beat it in. Now, we've got our grill going, which is a little too close to my candles.
I think you're too close to me, too.
So we're going to let this cook up. Now tonight, we bring you an evening with Edgar Allan Poe. Tonight, we bring you an evening with Edgar Allan Poe. This is from January 1st, 1970, originally airing at 8 o'clock Eastern Time p.m. Now, we're going to break this into two pieces because I can't bring you the full show thanks to the equipment. So tonight, we bring you The Telltale Heart, and we bring you The Pit and the Pendulum. So join us right here as we set up the fire, light up the gargoyle, and we chop up some meat. We got fresh chicken, we got bread, and we got a fire. I'm going to show you how to make your very own stuffed chicken breast, homemade stuffing, and I'm going to show you how to take a chicken breast, stuff it, and make it look like your very own heart. And speaking of hearts, I got to tell you guys, when my wife was getting this chicken here, she made a mention, and this is like the third time here in Cali that I've come across it and heard her mention free-range chicken.
That fire's burning me.
Yeah, well, step over it. Got to keep the gremlins out of the light and away from fire.
We don't want
Now,
to get
my wife has brought up several times that she keeps coming across free-range chicken. Now, I just got to say something. The only difference between this chicken and free-range chicken is this chicken, well, I know it was fed hormones and testosterone and all that weird shit by government. The free-range chicken, you know what you're getting? A chicken that ate a bunch of shit, a bunch of bugs, and a bunch of things you probably don't want to know it ate. It's a fucking chicken, man. Its brain is about this big. You know why they say cooped up? They get the term cooped up from being locked in, okay? The pandemic. You've been locked in your house. They're saying cooped up. You're cooped up. You've been cooped up too long. You know why they say cooped up? Because we keep chickens cooped up. You know why you can keep a chicken cooped up and not a human being? Because a chicken's brain is big enough that it probably equals the size of half of a green pea out of the stalk, and it probably thinks about as wildly as you would think to look down at the ground and then look up at the sky and forget what you just saw. A chicken is nothing more than a chicken. It's a fucking chicken. You want a free-range chicken? Enjoy eating dog poop.
True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus to rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, About midnight, I turned the latch of his door and I opened it, oh, so gently. And then when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it very slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Now, would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously I undid it, just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. This I did for 7 long nights, every night at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. I had my head in the room and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening and the old man sprang up in the bed crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of long drawn-out mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no. No, it was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul. And overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night just at midnight, when all the world slept, it had welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, it's nothing but the wind in the chimney. It's only a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp.
Now, before we go any further, I'd only like to suggest that the crickets chirping is the perfect representation of what we're going to be doing with our stuffing later. Finely chopping some garlic, some onion, and some celery. Now, what we're going to add to this later, and I will show you, is just a little bit of excess garlic powder as a light glaze when it's done. And I'll show you how to do just that. So let's get back to Mr. Vincent Price in an evening with Edgar Allan Poe.
Quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of long drawn-out mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no. No, it was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it had welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, it's nothing but the wind in the chimney. It's only a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp. Yes, he'd been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found it all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. He felt the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it, oh, you cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice and full upon the vultured eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow of my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the rays as if by instinct precisely on the damned spot. Now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier to courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of this old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now, a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled a heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. For many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. Still, this did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall, and then, at last, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. Now, if you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. First, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off.
So you want one cut down the middle of each of these. What you want to do from there, open it up. And right in the side, just want to dig a little hole on either side. Just like this. So what you want to do is create a pocket to put all of your stuff that you're stuffing in your chicken. Now what you want to do from there is you want to take some chicken seasoning, and then I have my own meat seasonings. In fact, on our next break, I'm going to explain to you guys what's exactly in these. So you want to season it light with just your meat seasoning. And then, when your pockets are cut, like that, you want to take it, put it face down on the grill. Just like that. Now, because this grill's pretty hot, we're putting them on the outside. We got to keep the temperature at a norm. What you're looking for is a nice golden brown, like this. Now, you don't want to cook it all the way, and I'll explain to you at our next break just why. Now, you know, as I'm cooking this chicken up, and as we're listening to this story, I'd only like to point out that, like many of us, this story is told through the eyes of a madman who, like all of us, believed he was sane.
Now, if you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. First, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, and then the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber, and I deposited all beneath the floor. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out. No stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught it all. And then, when I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused, and they, the officers, had been dispatched to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house, and I bade them search and search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own feet upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied my manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale, and I wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and they chatted. The ringing became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. It was a low, dull, quick sound, such a sound as a watch makes, enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath. Yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and I argued about trifles, but the noise increased steadily. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observation of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, grated it upon the boards, but the noise rose above all. It grew louder, louder, and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible that they heard not? Oh, Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains! Dissemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the planks! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart!
Now, as the police are going to lead me away, I only beckon that the old man's eye will bother me no more. All right, now, I got my little gremlin here, and I'm going to teach her how to stuff a chicken. Now, the first thing we got is some Canadian bacon. No thanks to Justin Trudeau. You know, the new Hitler. And what we're going to do is we're going to mince this up just the way somebody should have done to Hitler in 1942.
You're cutting it up.
Yep.
Why are you
You gotta,
cutting it up?
well, we've got to mince it up so it fits inside the chicken. We've also got some jalapeno cheese. And as a final touch, because every meal needs some greens, and I'm not one to like my greens, we've got some fresh asparagus. Funny thing about asparagus, you notice, if you ever eat asparagus, a couple hours later or even the next day, your pee smells a little funny. It's called aspartic acid. The name, asparagus. Now, our next story tonight is by Edgar Allan Poe again. And this one is called The Pit and the Pendulum. Now, Lowball's story, this is a man who fell in love with the wrong woman, and her wealthy and her very accepted father had power. He locked him in a cellar with a pendulum that swung overhead. The sharp knife that swung over. You guys have seen it in your old cartoons. Well, those of you old enough, I know the liberals today won't let you see stuff like that even in a cartoon. But the old story, that thing, it's on a big stick and it just swings back and forth. It's a huge knife. His whole crime was simply to fall in love with the wrong woman. I'm sure many of you out there know exactly how that feels. On that as well, you guys have noticed I got a little bit of an attitude. I got some spite in my voice tonight. On that, I can't say much, but those of you that saw that video I recently posted for my management, quite frankly, all I could tell you is people suck, people are evil, And if you don't do exactly what certain people think you need to do or what they tell you to do, you could find yourself in your very own pit with a pendulum swinging over. Okay. All right, let's play plastic surgeon. Let's give the chicken some big boobs. So we're going to take some of this. Ow, I bit my tongue. All right. Hold on. And the little pockets that we made on the side, you remember, right? All right. We're going to stuff some of this Canadian bacon or Justin Trudeau into the sides of this chicken breast. And then, because Justin Trudeau doesn't work alone, we're going to take some vegetables. In other words, we're going to take Joe Biden and we're going to stuff him in there right next to Justin Trudeau, because they belong together.
And I'm taking one.
All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this cheese and keep it to the side, but we're going to take this. Damn it. Fucking seasoning went right up my nose. And we're going to cover this in bacon, just like this. Bacon. I wish we could cover it in bacon. I'm poor. We're going to cover it in tinfoil, just like this. Now, there you go. And you want to take this guy and just want to put it on the grill, just like that.
Okay, but this one I want to make all by myself. I'm going to put this stuff in.
Okay, we are going to do that.
Myself.
So while my little gremlin and I finish stuffing these chicken breasts and giving them some implants,
But I put this
why don't you guys enjoy the first half of The Pit and the Pendulum?
I don't know which.
I was sick unto death with that long agony. I felt that my senses were leaving me. The dread sentence of death was the last distinct phrase which reached my ears. After that, the voices of the Inquisition judges seemed to merge in one dreamy, indeterminate hum. I saw the lips of the black-robed judges, white and thin even to grotesqueness, writhing with their deadly locution, fashioning the syllables of my name and the decree of death by torture. And then the blackness loomed close up against my skin, snuffing out even the evil whiteness of those damning lips, driving all sensibility into retreat in a mad rushing descent as of the soul into Hades. Then silence and stillness and night were the universe. I had swooned. Yet shadows of memory reflect dimly upon the inner walls of my mind. Shadows of tall figures that lifted and bore me down, down to a place of flatness and dampness and silence. Silence. Then all was madness. I would not open my eyes. I felt that I lay upon my back unbound. I reached out my hand and it fell heavily upon something damp and hard. I longed, yet dared not to employ my vision. It was not that I feared to look upon things horrible, but that I grew aghast lest there should be nothing to see. At length, with a wild desperation at heart, I quickly unclosed my eyes. My worst thoughts were confirmed. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I struggled for breath. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. Perspiration burst from every pore and stood in big, cold beads upon my forehead. I thrust my arms wildly above and around me, clawing, grasping, reaching for something, either damnable or saving, but something. Nothing. The agony of suspense grew intolerable, and so I arose. Cautiously, I stepped forward, my eyes straining from their sockets in hope of catching some faint ray of light. But the blackness was still a disguise, and until finally a wall, smooth, slimy, cold, a wall. I followed it up, stepping with all that careful distrust inspired by the thousand vague rumors of the horrors of Toledo. Finally, I took courage. I resolved to quit the wall and to cross the enclosure in as direct a line as possible. The floor was treacherous with slime. I advanced cautiously, some 10 or 12 paces in this manner, when suddenly I stumbled and fell violently on my face. In the confusion attending my fall, I did not immediately apprehend a somewhat startling circumstance. It was this: my chin rested upon the floor of the prison, but my lips and the upper portion of my head touched nothing. At the same time, my forehead seemed bathed in a clammy vapor, and the peculiar smell of decayed fungus arose to my nostrils. I had fallen at the very brink of a circular pit. Groping about the masonry, just below the margin, I succeeded in dislodging a small fragment and let it fall into the abyss. Many, many seconds I waited and hearkened to its reverberations as it dashed against the sides of the chasm in its descent. At length there was a sullen plunge into water, succeeded by loud echoes. At the same moment there came a sound resembling a quick opening of a door overhead, while a faint gleam of light flashed suddenly through the gloom and as suddenly faded away. Shaking in every limb, I groped my way back to the wall, resolving there to perish rather than risk the terrors of the pit. Agitation of spirit kept me awake for many long hours, but at length I fell into a deep slumber. Upon arousing, I found that objects around me were visible, a wild, sulphurous luster. By that I was enabled to see the extent and aspect of the prison. What I had taken for masonry seemed now to be iron in huge plates. Figures of hideous fiends in aspects of menace with skeleton forms overspread and disfigured the walls. In the center of the floor yawned the circular pit from whose jaws I had escaped. Then I realized that I was securely bound to a low framework of wood, strapping past in many convolutions about my body, leaving at liberty only my head and my left arm, so that only with much exertion could I supply myself with food from an earthen dish which lay by my side on the floor. The food in the dish was meat, pungently seasoned. Looking upward, I surveyed the ceiling of my prison. It was some 30 or 40 feet overhead, and suspended therefrom was what appeared to be a huge pendulum, such as one might see on antique clocks. While I gazed at it, I fancied that I saw it move, ever so slightly. I watched it for some minutes, somewhat in fear, but more in wonder. Then a noise attracted my notice, and looking to the floor, I saw several enormous rats. They had issued from the pit with ravenous eyes allured by the scent of the meat. It required much effort and attention to scare them away from the food. When I again cast my eyes upward, what I saw confounded and amazed me. The sweep of the pendulum had increased in extent by nearly a yard. But what mainly disturbed me was the idea that it had perceptibly descended. I now observed, with what horror it is needless to say, that its lower extremity was a crescent of glittering steel, about a foot in length from horn to horn, the horns upward, and the under edge evidently as keen as that of a razor, and it hissed as it swung through the air, inch by inch, with a descent only appreciable at intervals that seemed ages. Down and still down it came. Days passed ere it swept so closely over me as to fan me with its acrid breath. I prayed for its more speedy descent. I grew frantically mad and struggled to force myself upward against the sweep of the fearful scimitar. And then suddenly I fell calm and lay smiling at the glittering death as a child would at some rare bauble. I saw that the crescent was designed to cross the region of my heart. It would fray the serge of my garment. It would return and repeat its operations again and again. But the fraying of my garment would be all that for several minutes it would accomplish. To the right, to the left, far and wide, down, steadily down it crept, with the shriek of a damned spirit, to my heart, with the stealthy pace of the tiger. I alternately laughed and howled as the odor of the sharp steel forced itself into my nostrils. Down, relentlessly down. It vibrated finally within 3 inches of my bosom. 10 or 12 sweeps would bring the steel in actual contact with my clothing. And then, with this observation, there suddenly came over my spirit all the keen, collected calmness of despair. For the first time in many hours, or perhaps days, I thought of the rats. They had been literally swarming around the low framework upon which I lay. They were wild, bold, and ravenous, their red eyes glaring upon me as if they waited for motionlessness on my part to make me their prey. What food, I thought, have they been accustomed to in the pit? They had devoured in spite of all my efforts to prevent them all but a small remnant of the contents of the dish. Although my plan was scarcely sane, I proceeded at once to attempt its execution. With the particles of the oily and spicy meat which now remained, I thoroughly rubbed the restraining binding wherever I could reach it. Then I lay breathlessly still. At first, the ravenous animals were startled and terrified.
Now, we've got just some Great Value cream of chicken, which those of you out there back east and in Chicago area, what we call Great Value, most of you guys know is like the Jewel brand or the Osco brand. Now, I got to tell you guys one thing. There's a guy from Chicago who moved to California. I got to tell you guys, you know what? I work for Jewel and I work for Osco. And you guys are fools, man. You guys talk shit about Walmart cheating random people like crap. Dude, go work for Jewel Osco in Chicago. You're going to get screwed up the ass and wish that they had used a little bit of fucking lubrication first, okay? Speaking of lubrication, we got our cream of chicken. So we're going to put this right here, real light. Now, if you look right here, real light, right in the middle. Okay, that's not real light. Now what we want to do, take some cheese, jam that shit in there, man. Make that shit cheesy. And we're going to take this tin foil, wrap it back around. Now, if you guys take a peek over here, we got these other pieces. Now I'm going to rewrap this and seal it, and we're going to stick it back on here for another 5 minutes. So as I take care of this, why don't you guys get back to the show we'll get to the conclusion of the pit and the pendulum. And we'll see you right here at the Killer Kitchen.
Inches of my bosom, 10 or 12 sweeps would bring the steel in actual contact with my clothing. And then with this observation, there suddenly came over my spirit all the keen, collected calmness of despair. For the first time in many hours, or perhaps days, I thought of the rats. They had been literally swarming around the low framework upon which I lay. They were wild, bold, and ravenous, their red eyes glaring upon me as if they waited for motionlessness on my part to make me their prey. What food, I thought, have they been accustomed to in the pit? They had devoured in spite of all my efforts to prevent them all but a small remnant of the contents of the dish. Although my plan was scarcely sane, I proceeded at once to attempt its execution. With the particles of the oily and spicy meat which now remained, I thoroughly rubbed the restraining binding wherever I could reach it. Then I lay breathlessly still. At first, the ravenous animals were startled and terrified at the change. Observing, however, that I remained without motion, one or two of the boldest leapt upon the framework and smelted my bonds. This seemed the signal for a general rush. They leapt in hundreds upon my person. The measured movement of the pendulum disturbed them not at all. Avoiding its strokes, they busied themselves gnawing the anointed bindings. They pressed, they swarmed upon me in ever accumulating heaps. They writhed upon my throat. Their cold lips sought my own. I was half stifled by their thronging pressure. Disgust, for which the world has no name, swelled my bosom and chilled with a heavy clamminess my heart. Yet 1 minute, and I felt that the struggle would be over. Plainly, I perceived the loosening of the strapping. I knew that in more than one place it must be already severed. With a more than human resolution, I lay still. Nor had I erred in my calculations, nor had I endured in vain. I at last felt that I was free. Stroke of the pendulum already pressed upon my bosom. It had divided the serge of my garment. Twice again it swung, and a sharp sense of pain shot through every nerve. But the moment of escape had arrived. At a wave of my hand, my deliverers hurried tumultuously away. With a steady movement, I slid from the embrace of the bindings and beyond the reach of the scimitar. I was free! Free! But still in the grasp of the Inquisition. I had scarcely stepped from my wooden bed of horror when the motion of the hellish machine ceased, and I beheld it drawn up. My very motion was undoubtedly watched. Free! I had but escaped death in one form of agony, to be delivered unto worse than death in some other. With that thought, I rolled my eyes nervously on the barriers of iron that hemmed me in. I observed that the figures of the fiends upon the walls had now assumed a startling and most intense brilliancy. Demon eyes of a wild and ghastly vivacity glared upon me from 1,000 directions. It was unreal. While I breathed, there came to my nostrils the breath of the vapor of heated iron. A suffocating odor pervaded the prison. I panted. I gasped for breath. I shrank from the burning metal to the center of the cell. Amid the thought of the fiery destruction that impended, the idea of the coolness of the pit came over my soul like balm. I rushed to its deadly brink. I threw my straining eyes below. The glare from the enkindled roof illuminated its inmost recesses. Yet for a wild moment did my spirit refuse to comprehend the meaning of what I saw. At length it burned its way into my soul. Oh, for a voice to speak. Oh, horror! Oh, any horror but this! The heat increased rapidly, and once again I looked up. There had been a second change in the cell, and now the change was obviously in the form. The room had been square. The fearful difference quickly increased with a low, rumbling sound. The apartment was shifting its form into that of a rectangle. Death, I screamed! Any death but that of the pit! Fool! Might I not have known that into the pit was the object of the burning iron to urge me? And now closer and closer grew the walls. I shrank back, but the closing walls pressed me resistlessly onward. At length, for my seared and writhing body, there was no longer an inch of foothold on the firm floor of the prison. I struggled no more, but the agony of my soul found vent in one long, loud, and final scream of despair. I felt that I tottered upon the brink. Then suddenly there was a discordant hum of human voices. There was a loud blast as of many trumpets. The fiery walls rushed back. An outstretched arm caught my own as I fell, fainting into the abyss. It was that of General Lasalle. The French army had entered Toledo. The Inquisition is in the hands of its enemies.
Annabel Lee. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs above coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in the kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lay down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
welcome back.
Don't fucking run me over,
That
man.
was the
Shit
conclusion.
ain't right, homeboy. I told you to wait.
That was the conclusion to The Pit and the Pendulum. You know, you have to really admire Vincent Price and his portrayal there. If you watched, his eyes said everything. He really got into that role. It's something you don't see often in any actress, especially today. You go watch your Avengers and your X-Men and whatever bullshit is out today and your fucking Suicide Squad shit. You can watch all the propaganda you want, but if you want to see real acting, come up here onto YouTube one day when you're bored, and instead of looking at my channel, check out some of the old 1970s, 1960s sitcoms, TV specials, and you will see the absolute epitome of true acting. Now, I could go into how great the Duke is. Hey, we all know how good the Duke is. I mean, there's only so many guys who'll knock a motherfucker out right down into the fucking ditch because he called his wife a whore. The Duke's the man. And then sit back with a beer and fucking say, motherfucker, open your mouth. I'll knock you out again. That's the Duke. You can't go wrong with the Duke. But I gotta tell you, it's good. You know, if you're into the Western, that's cool. That's cool. The Duke, fucking Clint Eastwood, Marty McFly. But if you want to get good acting, talented acting, true acting, at its absolute best, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, and Vincent Price, I recommend to everybody out there. They blend together. Well, they blend together like our stuffing that we're about to make right now. So here's what we got. You guys know the gig. We got our bread that's been sitting out a couple hours. We're going to take about half that bread right into the pot like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set this bread to the side for just a second. We're going to take some cream of mushroom soup right on top, right here. Then we're going to take some butter, partially melted, just like that. And you guys remember me showing you, we've got our garlic, keep the vampires away. We've got our onions, and we've got our celery stalk, finely diced. All of it right in the middle, just like that. Just into the middle. Now what we're going to do is, you noticed I left a little bit of cheese, a little bit of meat left over from what we were stuffing the chicken with. Not much, just a tiny bit. Not even a quarter cup. Just like that. And we're going to fill this up with bread. You make a mess, don't worry about it, you got a broom. And if you don't have a broom, you have two hands that work well. If you don't have two hands that work well, I'm sure you've got kids. They work well. What we're going to do to finish this off, we're going to take just some average chicken broth. Again, I got the great value because I live in California, so we get great value instead of your Jewel Osco shit. You'll have to pardon the sirens in the background. I live in the city, and here in Bakersfield, we have more crime than Los Angeles and Chicago combined.
No. Here in Oildale, dog. Yeah.
Good call. Good call. Those of you in Chicago, don't bother trying to find me. I got friends now. Fuck you. Alright, hey, you guys, it's been a great night. Check back with me in just 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to show you the finished product. Until then, right now I'd like to introduce you guys to one of Edgar Allan Poe's most famous poems. Tonight, this one is Annabel Lee. I put this together, and I gotta be honest, with this one in particular, I really wanted you guys to understand. This is about true love that was lost because of outside influence. For those of you in love, you young kids out there in your 20s and your teens, Don't be like Romeo and Juliet from Shakespeare. Don't let your parents split you up. Don't let the outside influence tell you that somebody's not good enough. If you like somebody, you out there, you like that dude, go for it. If he likes you, take it for all it's worth. And you guys, if you like that girl, don't let your friends tell you she's not good enough. Don't let your friends tell you that you're not good enough. If you like that chick, go for that shit, man. Because I'll tell you what, true love doesn't know about looks. It doesn't see beauty or non-beauty. True love is from the heart, and you can never fake true love.
And true love waits for nobody.
Amen. This is Annabelle Lee.
Annabelle Lee. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabelle Lee. And this maiden lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabelle Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs above coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in the kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabelle Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabelle Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. And so all the night tide I lay down by the side of my darling, my life, and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
Okay. And the heart. This is the heart that I tore from the old man and buried in the floorboards beneath where I sat. The heart that beats and beats and beats and beats and beats and beats and beats. This has been a fun Killer Kitchen. I hope you guys have a great night. God bless, and we'll see you right here next week. But we've always got something cooking, and nothing is ever as it seems.